Welcome to episode 77 of the Geekly. My name is Jules.
I'm Lex. Today we are talking about Picard, devs, and the first episode of season 3 of Westworld. But before we get into that, got a few quarantine-specific polls. I wanted to know how we're all doing and what sort of hygiene practices we're up to in self-isolation. 45.5% of people are wearing jammies all the time. I thought, maybe some people who have to do teleconferencing might, put on a nice shirt or whatever. No, 45% all jammies. Even more startling, 90.9% of guys are not shaving.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I'm not shaving at the moment.
See, today I was just so bummed out about everything. I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna be a human today. So I shaved my head, shaved my face, I have contacts in, my pre-apocalypse outfit going. Gonna take the dog to the pond and let her swim around and have a good time because she doesn't know that we're in a pandemic or anything. So it's important, self-care, even in quarantine.
Let's crack on with Picard. The first 5 minutes of this episode, I was like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for. We've got a fight between Rios and Narek's ship, the Borg cube coming through the rift, the ship's been consumed by these orchids. I had no idea what the purpose of those orchids was at all.
I don't either. It just seemed like, I mean, the whole thing, and even Soji saying, I think we just call them orchids. It was just like, what the fuck is that?
And they would consume the ship, and you thought, okay, maybe they then bring it down to the planet or something, and it's like a kind of aesthetically pleasing cage that you'd put around enemy ships. But no, as soon as they hit the atmosphere of the planet, they started to burn up. I was really confused by that. And so after that opening 5 minutes, I was like quite excited, but then it kind of just slipped back into the old routine of people sitting around talking, prognosticating, brooding, scheming, reminiscing in fairly exposition heavy scenes. And it just, in general, it's how I mostly feel about Picard the TV show. It just makes for a fairly slow, repetitive, and it makes it quite ponderous at times. Like, I think my favourite two episodes were the 7 of 9 episode, where there's quite a bit of action, and the Riker episode, where there's a lot of fan service. But apart from those episodes, it's just felt, I as a non-Star Trek fanboy, have found it quite slow and ponderous. I expect you to totally disagree. And it just makes me wonder about the larger issue of, we know Picard, the man, is a diplomat. He's got the heart of a poet and an explorer. He's softly spoken. He's more about intellect. Kirk was more brawn, but Picard's more sort of intellect. And I just wonder whether this show is leaning too much towards these particular ideals and traits. And my personal opinion is that the kind of softly isn't really sustainable for a whole season of a TV show set within the Star Trek universe. And again, I totally expect you to disagree 100%, but we're at episode 9 of 10 now. And this, the trailer for next week's episode and the Romulan army of 200 warbirds turning up, I'm feeling very positive about that. But in the penultimate episode of the season, it was just generally another let's talk it out kind of episode. What are your thoughts?
I absolutely disagree.
I know, yeah, I know.
I'm talking with other kind of next generation fans. The expectations of the show, a show named Picard, was that we all wanted those qualities of Picard. I think one person in particular was like, just tell me that he stands there and gives these moralistic, philosophical monologues. And I was like, no, not yet. We haven't really got that. And he was like, oh, I'm not watching it until we get that. So I think for actual fans of Picard, like the hardcore fans, not kind of dismissing people who are just coming into it now or whatever, this is kind of exactly what we're looking for. We want to see Picard as an old man. We want to see his flaws. We want to see him kind of not be the perfect diplomat that he used to be on the Enterprise. And a conversation I was having about it the other day, yesterday actually, right after we watched it, was one of the refreshing things about Picard is that he's not perfect. Like Kirk was portrayed as kind of invincible. He was always right. He was a man's man. He was very much of his era. He was a bit of a misogynist, kind of a philanderer. And looking back on it, we can kind of be like, yeah, he's not perfect. But for the 60s, he epitomized everything that society said a man should be. Whereas you get to Picard, and he's flawed. He's not good with emotions. He's very uncomfortable around kids. He gets locked in his head sometimes, and people have to kind of like smack him around and be like, dude, come on, like be practical. You can't always have these high ideals in every situation. And I enjoy that about him. I enjoy his frailty. I enjoy his struggle to kind of uphold the things that he believes in when everybody around him is saying, no, we can't do that anymore. The one problem I have with the show is Dr. Girardi and how everybody has kind of just minimized the fact that she killed Bruce Maddox. I mean, Brent Spiner, can't remember the name of his actual character in this episode, but he was the son of the guy who created Data. He literally said, shame on you. She brutally murdered a guy, and that's your reaction? Shame on you?
Let's talk about Alison Pill for a second, because she's in this and she's in Devs. And I've got to be honest, I've only seen her in one thing before either of these shows, and that was American Horror Story Cult. And in this, she plays a character that's kind of scared of her own shadow, very kind of emotional, quite timid, meek. And in Devs, she plays somebody that's so like calm and so calculating. She's got this power to her, but she's completely detached from her own emotions. And these two different characters, I find them so incredibly different from one another. And I just think in general, she's destined for even bigger things in this going forward. But I would agree with you that everybody's kind of very willing to... I mean, Maddox was like the father of all of these synthetics. And she's basically met all these children. And she somehow wooed them. And now I don't think she's properly betraying Picard. I think I
suspected that as well, that
yeah.
She was kind of trying to keep herself out there so she could later on help him out. I feel like she needs to be held accountable for what she did, because it's not like she quickly killed this guy. Like, it was several minutes of him in suffering, and I mean, even if she quickly killed this guy, like, they were depending on him for help. He was a crucial part of their mission, and like, she betrayed them, like, massively. And everybody's just like, yeah, it's all right, you're sorry.
Yeah, when she walked onto the bridge, didn't she? And everyone was kind of really happy to see her.
She was just like, oh, so what happened to Deep Space 12? Am I not having to turn myself in anymore? And they're like, no, it's all okay.
I'm quite excited for next week's episode. We've got these 200 Romulan warbirds coming in. Your prediction from last week, which I think is probably going to happen, is that the Federation ships are going to turn up to intercept. I'm looking forward to that. What do you want from the next episode of Picard?
I don't know, to be honest, actually. I mean, I'm essentially watching this to spend some more time with Picard and to kind of fanboy over Patrick Stewart. I really enjoy the fact that 7 of 9 is back. I hope we get to see more of her. I mean, I think she's such a badass, and like, she's such a leader, and I would love to see her kind of lead the former Borg into an attack against the 218 Romulan ships. I would like the synthetics to kind of band together and you know, kind of like a Lord of the Rings moment where you have like the synthetics coming from one direction and the Borg coming from another direction, and then the Federation. They're all kind of going to defeat the evil bad guy and like uniting themselves, and the world kind of writes itself back into a next generation type world that's full of hope and optimism. Like, I kind of want that, and I've realized through watching Picard and the world that Picard exists in, that I'm kind of homesick for Next Generation and that sort of optimism and that universality of working together. So I think, yeah, I really hope that we get kind of a glimpse of that at the end of this season. Yeah,
it's very wholesome, and that's not really, there isn't much of that on TV at the moment. And in the past sort of 3 weeks, I've watched a fair bit of the Next Generation, actually. And that is a show that I've watched bits and pieces of over the years. I like the kind of the mix of styles and the mix of kinds of episodes and the mix of characters. And I guess this one just feels like it's same old most episodes. It's like almost like a repetition sometimes of particular conversations and particular story elements. I would say this is for the purist, and I think what we're saying to each other now solidifies that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like a hardcore Star Trek fan from, the moment I could start watching TV. I grew up with the Next Generation. I've watched everything multiple times, and this is just kind of like a cherry on top that I never thought I was going to get.
Let's talk about Devs, episode 4. I think we both struggled with episodes 2 and 3. My personal opinion, though, is that this is the best episode so far. When I was doing my film master's degree, I watched this film called Ex Machina by Alex Garland, and it had all these kind of gothic tropes because I did my dissertation on kind of the gothic. And so when I started watching this TV show, I was really hoping that we would get more of that, like a female-led gothic scenario, and that was not the case for the first 3 episodes. But it feels like it's kind of turning slightly, because after going to the psychiatrist, it seems that Lily is being gaslit. That's like a common trope that you get in gothic films, where everyone around you is trying to undermine your mental state. And in films such as Gaslight, husbands would do this to wives.
You claim your wife goes crazy and you can pack her off to the mental institution and you don't have to worry about her anymore.
Yeah.
You can go on with your life. So.
And the thing was, like, a man could go to a doctor and he could basically say, I think my wife's crazy. And the doctor would look at the man and go, you're a man. I trust your judgment. And they would be down there in like 5 minutes flat with the men in white coats to take her away. Might have been because he wanted just a divorce, wanted her money, wanted her out of the picture in some way. And so the final scene, when she's called the police and has basically said, I believe Sergei was murdered, and the police turn up, but so does the psychiatrist and so does Kenton. And they basically arrest her because of reckless endangerment, because of the car situation. And I just love the idea of, and it's not in real life, it's a horrific thing, but in media, the idea of the woman being forcibly removed and kind of institutionalized against her will, that is used to great effect in a lot of visual media that I've watched as part of the Gothic. And so finally I felt like I was getting some Alex Garland here, and that is possibly the first time I've been intrigued by the Lily storyline, if I'm being completely honest. And then Kenton, we don't quite know what he does with Jamie, but it looks like he's probably murdered him. I like this idea that going forward, they're going to try and undermine her mental state. They're going to be making her question herself. Does she know what she actually knows? All in the hope of burying this evidence that she has about the fact that the murder was staged. That's the Lily side of things. And do you have any kind of thoughts on the Lily storyline?
I wasn't that interested. I think we talked about it last week, how episodes 2 and 3 really sort of killed my enthusiasm for the show, and this episode didn't do anything to reel me back in. It followed pretty predictable tropes. They predicted that Lily is going to die in 48 hours, so presumably she's not going to die, and that's going to refute their algorithm. And Forrest even said that when he was talking to Alison Pill, what if it's not predetermined and we look a minute in the future and you cross your arms over your chest, but instead of doing that you say the future isn't fixed and you put your hands in your pockets. And so they're kind of, no, they are definitely leading us down the garden path, and there isn't a lot of subtlety, there isn't a lot of intrigue. It's very predictable and kind of trite, and I'm not there. I think the first episode made a lot of promises, and the subsequent episodes haven't followed through.
I like the idea that, I think his name is Lyndon?
Yeah.
Instead of using this deterministic de Broglie-Bohm theory, which I had to look up on Wikipedia, he's used the many worlds theory, which is kind of multiverses and so on. And he thought he had this major breakthrough, and he invites everyone in. He looks so kind of thrilled with himself. And you hear a Jesus talking from an Earth, rather than, let's call it, Earth Prime Jesus talking from Earth Prime's Earth. And I think he was expecting like a raise or something. And Forrest just goes berserk and basically says, you've not followed the protocols, you've not done your research within the boundaries of this project, you're fired. Please take your $10 million severance package and get the fuck out. I was just thinking, can you imagine working for someone where the severance package was $10 million?
I mean, that was pretty incredible. I liked the conversation between Lyndon and the other programmer. I can't remember his name, even though he's like a super famous actor. He's in everything. Yeah. And they were essentially like, he was heartbroken because even though the other programmer said, you're young, you're rich, just take it and go, get out. But the idea of working on something so revolutionary was way more important to him than anything else. And it really kind of put things in perspective. And I thought that was just an interesting interaction to have in the show, that most people would be like, you get a $10 million severance package, you're young, you're super smart, like you can do anything in the world at that point. But he was still like absolutely crushed, like the world was ending for him because he wasn't allowed to work on this particular project anymore. And then,
like I said, Alison Pill, just this really controlled performance. Like there's no excess emotion, and she goes up to Forrest and she very calmly says, "He was my best tech. You fired him. I'm like irate, but I'm not saying it with my words or my facial expressions. I'm very calm and robotic, just in case you're interested. And she uses the multi-worlds algorithm on his daughter, and suddenly Forrest can see her in like HD perfect quality. And that's kind of how the episode ended. We're 4 episodes in. I think this is probably the moment to make a decision about whether we continue to watch Devs. And it seems like it's not setting your world on fire. So
No,
I think
it's definitely not. Like, I would be thrilled to never watch this show again.
I think that will be that then for Devs. Okay, let's finish off with Westworld Season 3, Episode 1. You know how you just said that they kind of weren't leading us down the garden path and they weren't being particularly subtle about it? I wondered what your thoughts on Westworld Season 3, Episode 1 were about a simulation within a simulation.
The show has talked a lot about simulations and the idea of, not knowing what's real and what's fake. And I mean, the idea that, when they're at the party and the guy is like, we're a simulation in a simulation, like that's such a basic philosophical stance to take, and they didn't really explore it very much at all or do anything new and unique with it. Of course, it's also part of Dolores' storyline, which I'm still not invested in. I like her even less in the real world than I did in Westworld. That said, Aaron Paul's story I found very interesting, like his kind of introduction to this new world that humans are living in. I like the fact that, he's really struggling to survive in this world and doing, I guess, kind of like black market jobs, just trying to make ends meet. And the whole idea of, like, you have to get your stats up so that you can get permanent employment. And it kind of goes back to some Black Mirror episodes where, like the social media episode in particular is thinking of, where you have to have, like, so many votes or you get arrested. I would have been happy with an entire episode just about him. The fact that we got Dolores again being super powerful and doing whatever she wants is boring.
Yeah, the thing I found interesting about Aaron Paul's character Caleb was the fact that he was basically living like a guest within a park. He's doing these they're like side quests in a game like Watch Dogs or Grand Theft Auto, where he brings up this app called Rico, which is a good name for that app, and he goes out, does them. And he was doing some quite extreme stuff, and there didn't seem to be any repercussions, any police kind of presence. Well, we saw one police car, and he's getting rewarded with money. Again, much like a computer game or like somebody that's gone into something like Westworld. I'm curious as to what this reality is, because it seems like a very underpopulated, was it LA? And this is in like the 2050s. I'm curious if in some way the wool is being pulled over our eyes. Because, like I said, everything he's doing is like a host, is like a guest, except the parallels that the show tried to make between him and Dolores, where we'd see him waking up every day in the exact same way we'd see Dolores waking up every day. He's having these conversations with someone from his past that's actually dead in a similar but slightly different ways to the Dolores Arnold conversations. And I just liked it at the end where he basically said, I can't talk to you anymore. I need to go out and find somebody real. And so that was almost the moment of him achieving a sense of, not consciousness, but a sense like an awakening, like he wanted to have a new start with somebody. And so the irony is that he wants to find someone new, and he's found someone someone real, and he's found Dolores at the end of this episode. I just wonder, I like to speculate about what I think is going to happen in seasons, and I'm just wondering whether she will find humanity in him, and that's going to be the idea moving forward. I just like the idea that the show now feels a lot more streamlined. There are less storylines, which is something I bitched about last week for season 2. It feels slightly fresh. It feels like a new take on old characters. The Dolores storyline isn't, they haven't reinvented the wheel. She's still quite stodgy in a lot of ways, but it's piqued my interest again, and my interest going into this after season 2 was very low. So I'm willing to give this show a chance. It feels like almost a brand new show. Much like you, I find myself more interested in the Aaron Paul storyline, and I just hope, like everybody that got attached to Dolores, that got trapped in her orbit in season 2, they all kind of suffered for it. I want her to be maybe trapped in Aaron Paul's orbit, and maybe she discovers some kind of beauty in humans or something, and so rather than her bringing him down, he maybe brings her up. But I don't know what form the show's going to take moving forward. But I'm curious. I'm looking forward to a little bit more, actually.
I think that's the strong suit of Westworld. I have left every episode curious about what the next episode is going to be. I've had suspicions, I've had speculations, but I've never once been completely convinced that the show is going to take a certain path. And even if it's gone close to some of my speculations, there's always been a little bit of, okay, they did what I thought they were going to do, but they did it a little bit differently than I expected. So while I'm not a big fan of Dolores, I am very interested to see where this season goes and how it differs from previous seasons, and what this new world that we're seeing actually is. Because I mean, it very well could be a simulation within a simulation. I thought that at the end of season 2, where Bernard opens the door and we don't see what he's looking at, but he just smiles. And there was this kind of implication that maybe he wasn't actually in the real world. Maybe they were still in a simulation or something like Westworld. And we still don't really have the answer to that. I don't know if we'll ever get the answer to that. And that's kind of a cool thing. Like, sort of Inception, like we don't really know what's real and what's not, and they just leave us to ponder it.
3 questions. You can give me as long or as short answers as you like. We see Bernard heading back to Westworld. He's been framed for the whole Delos massacre. He's kind of a fugitive on the run. He's heading back to Westworld. On a scale of 1 to 10, give me your level of interest in the Bernard story.
-5.
I was expecting a big fat 1, but -5 is, feels about right. Hale wants Delos to go public so that anybody can buy up the shares. Presumably this is so Dolores can own Delos. What's your interest in Hale at all, and do you have any idea who might be inhabiting her body?
I wonder if it's kind of like a double sleeve sort of situation where
Ooh.
Dolores is both Hale and...
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I didn't consider that in all of my choices. Yeah, very good.
It's hard to tell though, because she did leave Westworld with kind of a collection of
in her little handbag.
Obviously Teddy has been sent to kind of the Valley Beyond, so presumably he's not one of the little people that she took with her, and I'm not really sure who she would have taken with her, because she didn't really, aside from Teddy, she didn't really seem to connect with anybody. I mean, obviously Bernard was one of them because he's still out there in the world, so that's kind of a big question as who her allies are now, and who she's put into certain bodies. Presumably we'll discover further down the road. Not particularly interested in the whole boardroom thing. The corporate storyline in season 2 I felt was one of the weaker ones. In season 1, the kind of friction between Ford and Teresa was interesting, because it was very much a power struggle between kind of creative and corporate, and gave us a bit of insight into Ford's mind. But if they go strictly into corporate boardrooms and power moves like that, it's going to lose my interest pretty quickly.
And the final question, I know she's your favourite character. What did you make of the scene with Maeve in what people are calling Warworld?
I think I missed that.
Oh, it was post credits.
Oh yeah, I didn't see it.
Ah, okay. Well, it was about 2 minutes long. I'll tell you what happens. I'll spoil it for you now. She basically wakes up in a chair, dressed in kind of 40s attire, dead bodies around her, goes to the window, opens the curtain, and there is just Nazi paraphernalia on the walls, and she's in some kind of wartime European town or village. So that was that. Not sure how she's got there, not sure who's put her there, but I'm very curious to see what happens. As for the setting, I mean, I've probably seen too many Nazi places. I'd much rather she went to some kind of, different park that was like a space station, or like Jurassic Park or something like that, or some kind of, Roman Legion or something. But yeah, if she's got to be in a different park, she might, every season I feel like Maeve's going to be in a different park, just, visiting all of them. Hopefully we'll get a bit more of Maeve next week.
Yeah, actually that was kind of my disappointment from this episode, because like at the end of season 2, we get the implication that Felix was going to pick her out as one of the ones that could be salvaged, because he has this weird connection with her. And so I was hoping to see more of Maeve, potentially more of Felix, because I'm kind of fond of him. He's a very endearing character. They need to stop putting post-credit scenes randomly at the end of shows. I mean, Jesus, some of us don't like to sit through credits.
Before I watched it, a lot of people said it felt like the kind of pilot episode to a brand new show, and I was skeptical, but I see that, if I'm honest, and it feels streamlined, and it feels refreshing to not have to bounce back and forward in time. It feels like maybe in the 2 years or whatever it's been since the last season came out, they've maybe had a bit of a conversation about what's working, what's not working, and so they're just sending it in a new direction. I think that's probably for the best. So
Yeah, I would enjoy it less bouncing around timelines. I think season 1 did it really well. It got a bit confused in season 2. It would be nice just as kind of a breather if we only dealt with kind of one timeline with maybe the occasional flashback here and there, but not like concurrent through the entire season.
all right, well, I think that'll do for this week. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Podchaser, loads of places like that. We'll be back next week with another episode.
We'll actually be back in a couple days with a new episode. We're recording a little bit more frequently to help you get through the boredom of self-isolation. We know a lot of people are working from home and stuck inside, and just from videos and things I've seen on Twitter and Reddit, people are losing their frickin' minds. Yeah, stay sane, wash your hands 2 meters from people if you can. I have to go to the grocery store later. I'm a little bit concerned about that, but, we do what we must.
See you next week.